Okay, guys, this is going to be my review for the movie Soul. I watched Soul last night, and what do I think about it? Per the course of Pixar, it was great. I think it's very different than what you're expecting. Um, in the trailers, and I will, be covering some spoilers in this film in this review. Sorry, where you think, okay, it's gonna start off. It starts out how you'd expect. Him on Earth, him trying to get the gig that you see in the trailer, then him, getting injured and going to the soul world or whatever, the great beyond and the great before. But then they kind of bait and switch that, and he goes into Earth. And what I love about this film is how Joe compares and contrasts to 22. And because they've both been Joe, I love seeing the comparison of what Joe is really like and what 22 is like as Joe. And I just think it was just a great ideological film where it asks these deep questions. What is your purpose in life? Finding your purpose. How sometimes your spark is not as simple as you think and is not as cut and dry as you think. And this idea of life can be whatever you want. And I love that 22 goes into the world with just a childlike innocence, and where she's like, I could be, my spark could be walking or cloud watching or flying or whatever. And I love, and Joe says, and Joe's like, that's not a spark, that's everyday things. And I think I love that at the end of the film Joe realizes himself, yeah, your spark, your purpose in life can be whatever you want it to be. And I think it's just kind of a full circle, and the journey. I love the journey because more not just the journey itself, but what the journey has on our characters, and how each character, particularly obviously in this case 22, who's the soul that who Joe meets and is partnered up with, but Joe and 22, how their journeys start off at very different places. Joe eager to live his life, and 22 eager to to get away from any sort of living. And I just love at the end of the day what happens. It's not Joe convincing 22 to get Joe back to the real world. It's Joe trying to give the spark to 22. And I think it's this idea of Joe is dead set on one thing and one thing in life, but he realizes, is that even my thing? Is that even my purpose? And I think I love how by Joe observing 22 as in the real world, as when Joe sees 22 in the real world, I love how he's able to take away lessons from 22 and how she approaches life very differently than Joe, because you see in the first 10 minutes, you see what he does. You see his hard dead set on singing and being a musician, and throughout the first two acts, that's all he's dead set on. That's all his goal. That's what he believes in. That's what he thinks is, well, his spark in life, his purpose in life. And I just love this idea, this metaphor that 22, I think in many ways is the ideal version of a human being. A person who could do anything she wants to do, be anyone she wants to be, do anything that she wants to do. And I love how those lessons you see throughout the film, throughout this journey, and you see how the character development in this film is great, but I expect nothing less from this film. And what I love is it's sad, but it's not like one of those Pixar heartthrobs where, yes, there's tons of sad stuff, but it just is less sad, but more shows you a sense of wonder, and through change and through evolution, through realization. And it's about at the end of the second act where you see our main character realize something. And I love what that musician said. And you kind of have to think about this. The musician said, a little fish came into a big fish. And the little fish said, I want to find the ocean. And the big fish says, you're in it. And the little fish says, no, this is just water. And I think that's kind of the metaphor of Joe, where it's like Joe, what he wants to be is this musician, living his life as a musician in a jazz club. Then he does that. He lives out his dream, then says, "What's next?" And then when the musician says, "This again tomorrow," you realize both the fish and Joe wanted more than what they thought they wanted. Because in reality, the little fish clearly was not looking for the ocean. He was looking for something bigger. And Joe was not looking to be a jazz musician. Clearly, he was looking for something bigger. And see, this film ends on just such an interesting note where it ends with so many possibilities. You could say like, oh yeah, Joe's gonna go back to the jazz club and continue being a musician, or he can go back to teaching band, or he can be going to meet 22. I was hoping that we'd give 22 a body, that we could see what her human manifestation looked like, but I didn't care. But I just think there was this wonder to this film that I don't think you can capture, in many ways. And I think this film, while it's not the greatest Pixar film, I'll still say Toy Story 3, Toy Story, Up, and maybe Incredibles, or maybe better than this film. But this film, I think, is the Pixar's biggest transcendent nature from just an animated film. Where there's jokes that kids would like, but like even in Up, there's like the flamingo and Russell, and in Toy Story they're toys, so kids can really appreciate that. And in Coco there's music and incredible superheroes, and Ratatouille, rats and cooking. But here in this film, other than some jokes here or there, there's nothing that states this is a kids movie. And I hate when people are like, oh, Pixar's just kids movies. I always say the term, they're adult films that are family friendly. You know what I mean? Like, for example, Mickey Mouse Clubhouse is a kids show that is targeted at kids. Or what's a kids animated film? I guess you could say like there's certain animated films like Angry Birds, the Angry Birds films, or the Emoji Movie. Those are kid targeted films. Those are films meant for kids. Whereas Pixar, with the exception of maybe the Cars films, Pixar is adult films that are family friendly. Meaning, yeah, families can watch and enjoy them. But believe me, a kid cannot watch Soul and be like, yeah, this. See, every kid who watches Soul can only appreciate this much of it. They can only appreciate the jokes and 22 at some points. And I that's it. But when you get older, and I think that's the case with most Pixar films, where I first watched the Toy Story films, and you're like, oh, yay, toys, so fun. But as I got older, I realized the metaphors of the Toy Story films and what the toys represent. Which makes those films so timeless. And I just think with this film, it just transcends animation. And it's still family friendly. Like, okay, yes, a family in theory could watch this film. But you show a 4-year-old this film, they won't get it. Because there's a deeper meaning than someone just going into the afterlife and coming back and going back and going. There's something more. And I think the great shots. This film was greatly animated, but the world of The Great Beyond and The Great Before, visually speaking, like the scene where Joe is dropping and dropping and dropping, after he jumped off the Great Beyond Bridge, that was just visually stunning. It reminded me of some like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse visuals. But I don't know what not. I don't think I didn't like anything about it. I think they gave us enough character development of Joe. Like, they gave us a hint, a flavor of what Joe was like before he went into the Great Beyond, or before he was gonna go to the Great Beyond. But they gave us enough to understand Joe, who Joe is, what Joe thinks is his purpose. They gave us everything we needed that is relevant to the story about Joe in just like the first 5 minutes. So yeah, I'm in 22. It was great. Yeah, I just love. Pixar is also great at complex characters, and this was another knock out of the park. But we expect nothing less, and I think this amps my excitement for Lightyear and for the other Luca or whatever the other Pixar films, and even um, Turning Red. You know, there are other Pixar films coming up. So, anyways, stay tuned for videos coming right at you.